Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It's brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Mike Gill in the Sports Bash. Adam Caplan's here from the Inside the Birds podcast. And we can tell you that the Eagles have stood pat at the deadline. They have not made a move, but the Washington Commanders, they got better, Adam Caplan, as we have crossed over the deadline on this Football at 4. How are you, my friend?
Mike, good to talk to you. Yeah, good show today. I've enjoyed it. I've listened to like the last 30 to 45 minutes. And we don't have time to get to the Nick Sirianni stuff. We don't have an hour. We just don't have that kind of time in our segment. But I thought you've handled and been very calm. I've listened to your show, this week, yesterday some too. And it's we call it the football operations belief. Like, there's a certain way you're going to be aggressive, and people don't like it. People got mad at us because we didn't go off during our post-game show. We had a couple people scream at us like, "You idiots! Why aren't you getting pissed off?" We're not fans, folks. We're supposed to give you the lowdown on how things should go based on our information. So we're going to talk more about it on Friday's show, Mike. We'll get into it. I'll give you kind of what I know, the background on it. I'm gathering a little bit of information for people involved. I remember Ryan Paganetti, who was here, who's now with Doug. He was the guy in Doug's ear to go for it or not go for it. Of course, they didn't have the tush push then, but it's fascinating. Boy, the anger that people have for Sirianni it's incredible. Yet 40 and 19. Really, look, we could debate how good of a coach the guy is, but it's kind of like my favorite one now is Sirianni's got nothing to do with success. The roster's so good, and his coordinators are good. Okay, that's fine. You think the coordinator's good? So basically, they don't need a head coach. They'll just roll the ball out and let the coordinators coach, and Nick should not organize anything or oversee anything. Okay.
Yeah. Well, it's almost like, Dan Campbell's the same way. What does Dan do? I mean, it seems that Dan is a guy that people like because of his personality, and he seems more football and gruff, where Nick, I think, is more associated with maybe being an analytical guy, but basically same as Dan is very analytical. He goes for it. He's aggressive. That's what Dan does. But he has a similar role that Nick does.
He does. He's a CEO head coach. It is so funny, Mike. We're going to do this. We have the data, and this was really on my mind the last 2 weeks. We put some of the stats on Patreon on over the weekend for our pregame notes. We always try to get some unique stuff that's not out there. So we're going to put this out on our show tomorrow. The pass-run ratio, you evaluate whether teams are running team or passing team by their first-half play calls. That's not something that could be really challenged. It's the fact. That's how teams do it. Joe Banner showed this to me when we worked together at ESPN. I wasn't a true believer until he showed me the data going back 30 years. The Eagles are a running team for the first time that I've covered them. They are truly a running team. It's pretty incredible. We're going to talk about this on Football at 4 as well on Friday. I'll just tell you this. The Eagles are the only NFL team running the ball more than they're passing it. The only one of all teams.
Wow.
Like, yep.
Well, they pass on the trade deadline here. So let's get your thoughts on that, because the Commanders and the Lions, we could lump the Lions in here because they are a NFC contender and probably the number one contender or the favorite right now. But the Commanders have made a move. The Lions have made a move. The Eagles did not. Did they look into anything and decide, we don't really have a lot of spots we can upgrade? What's the thoughts on the trade deadline and passing?
Yeah, just our background, they looked into the edge rusher group of everything and all their talks. We understand it from getting word from other teams and how their talks were. But here's the thing. The edge rusher group, Mike, a lot of older players. Like the only guy that was not moved, which, boy, really surprised me, Azeez Ojulari, who's having a really good year now. He's there. Ironically, he is the Bryce Huff of the Giants. When I say Bryce Huff of the Jets last year, he is their third pass rusher. He has a bunch of sacks. He's a good player. He's just not really a starter. I think what will happen is they'll let him walk, and maybe it's because they think they'll get a compensatory pick. That's what the Bengals have done. From talking to other clubs, the Bengals historically don't do anything at the trade deadline. They did this year. They were a very minor trade for Khalil Herbert. They get the 7th-round pick. They have injury issues at running back. But getting back to this situation, so yeah, the Washington. Let's get to them, Mike. Washington made a big move. So they were looking at two things, I'm told, and I'll give you something that may blow some people away, but they did it. in addition to Marshawn Lattimore, they also looked in, I'm told, with the Panthers for J.C. Horn, who is one of the best young corners in the National Football League. Yeah, I was told that a couple of days ago that they looked into it. They got no sale. They're not doing it. Other teams called the Panthers for him. They were told he was not available. I have no idea. I don't even think it got to an offer standpoint because I was told they were not. They were not going to move him. They don't want it. The Panthers and Dan Morgan, the GM, and everyone else there. They don't want. Look, they're bad. We know they're the NFL's worst team, but you can't trade your best young players, and that's good for Dan not doing anything. So, what did the Commanders do today? They made the big trade for Marshawn Lattimore. Marshawn Lattimore is a very talented player. Could play in zone. Could play in man. You know about the epic battles with Mike Evans. If you follow the NFL, you probably know about that. Very physical player, really good player. But Mike, he's had major hamstring issues going back to Ohio State. He missed last week's game, didn't practice due to a hamstring issue. Now, was that a real one? Did they know they were going to trade him, so they made sure he didn't play? I can't answer that. You're not supposed to lie on injury reports, so we have to trust the Saints. But he's got to pass the physical, by the way, or the trade will not go through. But the bottom line is, the Commanders did something that they wanted to do. What I'm told is this. They want to move Mike Sainristil, the second-round safety corner, nickel guy. He's been playing on the outside. That's really not his natural position. So their plan is to move Lattimore, obviously on the outside. That's his position, opposite Ben St. Just, and then they'll move Sainristil to nickel. That really helps their secondary, Mike. That is a game changer. Now, again, if he's healthy. When healthy, he's a top-shelf corner. He's not elite, but he's very good. But again, big injury history going back several years now. He's only 28. He seems like he's been in the league longer. He turns 29 in May. They may have to look at his contract for next season. There's a lot of cash due, but they'll make do with it now. And then, look, they also needed a receiver. That was a big problem for them. I'm stunned that they did not make a trade for a receiver. If you're really going for it, which they clearly are, why don't you help your young quarterback in Jaden Daniels? They're not good enough. Like, think about it. Olamide Zaccheaus, Mike, of all players, has a major role at receiver for them. That can't happen. And that's the other move they needed to make. They did not. But to move this along here, the Lattimore trade had to happen, or at least get a good corner. They did. They got that. Quan Martin will stick at safety, as I understand it, most likely. Jeremy Chinn's the other safety we know the Eagles liked in the past, and they're really good. They don't have a very good pass rush. We'll get down to Washington in their schedule in a couple of minutes, but this is a big move, and they had to do something.
All right. Adam Caplan, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast here. Let's, you look at the Lions and the move that they made. They get Smith. They were already the favorite, and they've been playing well even after the Hutchinson injury. But adding Smith, this solidifies them as the favorite, not only in the NFC, maybe in the league.
Well, I'd slow up a little bit. Zadarius Smith is 32 years old. He's a good football player. You could play him inside a nickel. I remember hearing him on us here on NFL radio talk about playing for Jim Schwartz. He'd never played in the wide nine before, so he had to learn how to do it. Look, he still has something left, no question about it. Proven player, but 32 years old. It's not a game changer. The other problem is Zach Pascal. Not Zach Pascal. That's the receiver. Josh Pascal, who's a young pass rusher, a second-rounder in 2022. He's missed the last 2 games due to a mystery illness. They just ran out of pass rushers, Mike. They had to do something. There were other pass rushers I'm told they were looking at, but this is the one that cost them the least amount. And again, he's a proven veteran, so this helps them. Remember, they made the trade for Carlton Davis in free agency at corner. They got him from Tampa Bay. They drafted 2 corners: Terrion Arnold, the first round out of Alabama; Rakestraw, the physical corner from Missouri. They brought in Amik Robertson as a nickel corner. They're really loaded in the secondary. They're excellent at inside backer. Ali McNeil's terrific. The nose tackle, the Eagles probably should have drafted, but they got Milt Williams is pretty good. So, yeah, Mike, they're really good. They're the NFL's best team. I know the Chiefs are undefeated. What a game last night. I've been on the line for 3 years. I'm a big fan of the way they do business, and they're really good, Mike. There's no question. And that's the problem that you probably have if you're an Eagles fan. And I know people will complain that Howie didn't make a move. This strengthens. This gets the Lions better. And now that's just the way it is, Mike. You're right. They need a pass rusher, and they got one.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't know that Smith, I don't know if it's going to turn out to be a Robert Quinn type of thing where, hey, here was a guy who was really good, and we'll see if there's anything left in the tank, and that helps him out, or is he just a guy, that...
No, he can play.
Yeah.
Smith can play, Mike. No, he can play. He's also not hurt. Robert Quinn, here's the problem. He had a back problem and a knee problem, and he wound up retiring within a year after he played for the Eagles. So it's like, okay, that was a total miss. Look, Dave, the Eagles at the trade deadline had hit more misses than hits in recent years. We're not talking about the A.J. Brown trade, which is during the draft. We're talking about Golden Tate. That didn't work out. They didn't get much out of him. Kevin Byard, that was a disaster. It's really hard to trade for safeties. They have to learn the defense completely different than the scheme he was in. They've had some success, but not a lot, unfortunately. It's hard when you're changing schemes.
All right, Adam, you got Dallas coming into town. Let's go around the NFC East real quick. And obviously they got injury problems. Dak Prescott's going to be out. They've got all sorts of problems here. This Dallas team looks like it's unraveling right before our very eyes.
All right, so you mentioned the injury problems. Check this out. So Tyler Guyton, who was a right tackle at Oklahoma, is playing left for them. He's got a neck injury. They think it's minor that he should be able to play. Prescott's out. He's going to go on IR. So that means he's got to miss 4 games. That's huge. Cooper Rush, who did face the Eagles 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago, by the way, October 22, he had a bad game. He played poorly. Eagles won that game. He's 1-0 against he's 0-1 against the Eagles. But they're big injuries, Mike. So what's going to happen is Michael Parsons is going to practice. He's got a high ankle sprain. He's missed. Boy, they should have really put him on IR. That was a mistake. He's going to practice this week. If he gets through practice, he'll clear him to play. If he can't, he won't play. Deron Bland, one of their starting corners, he just started practice this week. He's on IR. He's come back from a broken foot. They're also down DeMarcus Lawrence, their other starting defensive end. He's got a mid-foot sprain. They hope he returns before the end of the regular season. Marshawn Nealon, their second-round pick, who was their third end, he's out for the season with major knee surgery. So, Mike, you look at it, they're without their quarterback. Oh, Brandon Cooks, my bad. I forgot to mention him, their other starting receiver. He's still on injured reserve. So that's why they made the trade for Jonathan Mingo today. From the Panthers, who's been an underachiever as a former second-round pick. So they've got, you mentioned it, they've got all sorts of injury problems, not just on one side of the football, both sides. They've underachieved. They don't tackle well. They don't cover well. They're a bad football team. Oh, by the way, Mike, I gave you the stat 3 weeks ago. Over the last 4 home games, going back to the playoffs, they've given up 167 points at home. That's unbelievably bad. 41.5 points per game. That's embarrassing.
They play Philly, Houston, Washington, and the Giants. So it looks like a possible 1-3 at best stretch for Dallas. But you can really put the knockout blow with a win on Sunday. Commanders, they got Pittsburgh, Philly, Dallas, Tennessee. Not the Commanders' schedule the rest of the way. They might pile up 11, 12, 13 wins with the schedule they have here. But, the Commanders, it looks like we got to take them for real.
We do. A lot of us missed the boat on them, but their schedule was great. But see, here's the thing, a very similar schedule, Mike, to the Eagles. They have to play the Eagles twice. The Steelers, isn't it funny? The two teams that are very aggressive at the trade deadline, the Washington and Steelers. Washington hosts the Steelers. Now, their final 4 games after their Week 14 bye week, at New Orleans, host the Eagles. Now, that game almost certainly will be flex if it means something. Then they host Atlanta, then they're at Dallas. So, yeah, look, both the Eagles and the Commanders have had good schedules, and they've taken advantage of it.
Lastly, got the Giants, who are struggling along here. They play in London this week against Carolina. I mean, a stinker of a game. Tampa, who fought hard last night, Dallas and New Orleans. I mean, they got 4 winnable games. I guess they could get themselves kind of back in the mix if they win these 4.
Well, the problem is, Mike, they're so bad. The quarterback's not good. Their line that they thought would be much better is not. They should have traded Darius Slayton. They didn't. They didn't make any trades, surprisingly. They play in London against the Panthers, what I'm calling ticket broker's day off in London. But you know what? They go crazy for football in London. They'll go. You mentioned the Bucs, man. What a great game that was. I really wanted the Bucs.
You go for 2? You go for 2 there?
Yes, but see, Mike. Here's the thing. Todd Bowles and I know him a little bit to say hello, but I don't know him like I know other coaches. He's a defensive head coach. I just feel like these defensive head coaches are not aggressive. See, I'm who I am. If I'm an aggressive coach, I'm aggressive every time, and I'm going to be wrong. Eventually, I'm going to be wrong. You can't get it right every time, and you're going to scream at me for why did you do that? You should have kicked the extra point. You know, it's like Jake Elliott. I was in the minority. Jake Elliott, 9 of 10 last year on 50-yard field goals. This year he was 0 for 2 coming in the game. I said, still go for it. He missed it. Okay. When he yelled at me, fine. I was wrong. He missed it. But you have access to the results. You didn't have them before. That's the Ron Jaworski. Jaws I used to love that. Talking to Jaws about it, when people would complain about coaching decisions, he's like, well, yeah, you have access to the results. Did you say this before they did it? You didn't like it. And that's the problem. But so the Giants, yeah, Michael, look, they're not going anywhere. Boy, they've been so bad for so long. What has happened to that organization?
Yeah, it's a mess, and I like it. Adam Caplan, everybody, from the Inside the Birds podcast. He's back on Friday as we look at Eagles and Cowboys. Thanks, Adam.
You guys.
All right, there he is, Adam Caplan here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.